You're listening to Missing Persons, brought to you by AbJack Entertainment. Be sure to check out some of the other great true crime podcasts from this network, including The Murder in My Family, DNA ID, Zodiac Speaking, Scene of the Crime,
Beyond Bizarre True Crime,
Citizen Detective,
and Campus Killings.
All of these podcasts are available for you to binge on right now, wherever you listen to podcasts. Subscribe where you're listening to this podcast so you don't miss an episode.
The views and opinions expressed by guests on this podcast do not necessarily represent those of the podcast, its creators, or sponsors. If you would like to discuss a missing persons case on this podcast, please be sure to visit missingpersonspodcast.net. This episode may contain unsettling or disturbing subject matter. Listener discretion is advised.
Welcome to Missing Persons, a podcast dedicated to spreading the word about people who have vanished under mysterious or unexplained circumstances, and the family members who are looking for answers. I'm Jess Betancourt.
And I'm Mike Morford. Together we created this podcast to help give a voice to people who continue to search for their missing loved ones, in some cases even after decades have gone by. In each episode, you'll hear from Jess giving listeners the backstory and the basic facts of the disappearance.
Then Mike will speak with someone who's intimately connected to the missing person, and his guest will share their story with us.
Please stay tuned at the conclusion of this episode to hear about our Patreon program and our commitment to help find people who have gone missing. We'll also share with you where you can find more information and how you can join our team and help our efforts. You'll get recommendations for other podcasts we think you'll enjoy, and more.
So sit back and enjoy this episode, and who knows, maybe you can help us find someone who's missing. Episode 57, Andrea Knabel. In 2019, Andrea Knabel was a 37-year-old single mom of two young sons who was going through some hard times. Andrea had a degree from the University of Louisville in marketing, but had been let go from her job at Humana and had been picking up jobs here and there to make ends meet. Her 6- and 8-year-old sons each had different fathers, and Andrea had a good relationship with one of them and an okay relationship with the other. She co-parented with them both, but she was struggling to make ends meet. Because of her financial woes, she had been evicted from her home, and to make matters worse, she had recently lost her vehicle to a crash after it broke down on the highway and was totaled by a passing car. So Andrea was living without transportation and reliant on friends, family, and Ubers to get around. In August 2019, Andrea was mostly living at her mom's house in the Audubon Park neighborhood of Louisville, Kentucky. Sometimes she stayed with friends. She also occasionally stayed at the home of one of her sisters, Erin, who is our guest today. Andrea and Erin were always very close, being only a couple of years apart in age and even sharing the same birthday. Erin and her kids lived in their own home not far from their mom's place. But that summer, Andrea and Erin's mom's home was in the midst of a large-scale renovation. The work was being done by Andrea's other sister, Sarah, and her fiancé, Ethan, who was a contractor. Because the work was so invasive and resulted in there not being a working bathroom in the house, their mom was staying with friends. Sarah and Ethan lived out of town, but because they were doing the reno, they were staying at the mom's house as well, along with their kids and, on occasion, Andrea's kids. So the house was under construction and was full of people despite it being somewhat torn apart. Andrea's family says that the media portrayal of her has not always been entirely accurate. Several news articles depicted Andrea as diagnosed mentally ill, erratic and unstable, and possibly drug addicted. Her sister Erin tells us that Andrea was depressed due to the convergence of negative events in her life. In other words, she was at something of a low point. But this was not who Andrea was overall. In general, Andrea was an upbeat, positive person who had not given up at all on her life and still had a fighting spirit. Despite all the obstacles she was up against, she was not at rock bottom. She had a lot to live for, including her sons, her family, and many friends. Her father, Mike, said of her in an interview, quote, "She was attracted to the best of people and the worst of people. She had friends all across the spectrum of color, of socioeconomic backgrounds, education levels. She was friends with everyone." Andrea's friend Suzette Rodriguez wrote on Facebook, quote, "She's a good mom, friend, and has a beautiful heart. Andrea would do anything for anyone. Smart, funny, strong, loving, always there for people." According to Aaron, Andrea had been prescribed Adderall because in the year or so leading up to her disappearance, her behavior was increasingly erratic and she was increasingly demanding of the time and attention of her family because of her unpredictability, irregular hours, mood swings, and need for constant companionship. Her family believed she needed professional help to get her life back on track. Her mom made sure Andrea had visited a psychiatrist and took her meds, but there was increasing tension within the close-knit family caused by Andrea's behavior. She was a night owl and was up at all hours on the phone, having friends over or visiting friends, and wanting to hang out at impractical and disruptive times. She also had a boyfriend whom the family felt might be leading her down a harmful path. And even in the best of times, Andrea was a very expressive and dramatic person who took things very personally and wore her heart on her sleeve. So let's get to the disappearance. It was August 12, 2019, a Monday. Andrea was staying at the house on Audubon Park and was trying to find a job. She wanted one that would permit her to work from home because she felt she wasn't suitable for an office job. This was because she was suffering from lesions or sores of some sort on her face. Aaron tells us she and Andrea both suffered from eczema and that the family suspected that this was the root cause of the lesions. But there is no denying that it's possible the sores could have been caused by drug use, although the family has no confirmation of that. But whatever was causing the condition, it had gotten worse of late, and it was a problem. It resulted in Andrea feeling increased anxiety. And her having lost her job, totaled her car, gotten evicted, and having health issues all came to a head on that day. On the 12th, Andrea was at her mom's house where she was staying. Her boys were with their respective fathers. As she often did after work in the evening, Andrea's mom came over and brought dinner and wanted to see how the renovations to her house were coming along. Sarah and Ethan were there as well. While they were eating Chinese, Andrea's mom was talking with her daughter about her life choices, and Andrea took her comments as a criticism. There was some concern on the mom's part about Andrea hosting people she and Sarah and Ethan did not know at the house at all hours of the night, which made them all uncomfortable and leery. And she wanted Andrea to get professional help to try to set herself straight. Specifically, she wanted her daughter to get a full psych evaluation. According to Aaron, Sarah chimed in agreeing with their mother, and Andrea felt totally ganged up on. A heated argument ensued, things escalated, and Andrea was very, very upset. Andrea then asked Ethan for a ride, and he and his son drove her to McDonald's and then to the hospital to have the sores on her face evaluated. There he dropped her off. The exact timeline is as follows. 9:01 p.m., Andrea and Ethan left the mom's house in the 3000 block of Chickadee Road. 9:07, they arrived at the McDonald's at 3100 Poplar Road. 9:40, Andrea left the McDonald's with Ethan and her nephew. And at 9:50, Ethan dropped her at the Kentucky One Health Medical Center on Dutchman's Lane. At 11:22 p.m., Andrea left the Kentucky One Health Medical Center via Lyft. She used a Lyft gift card her mom had given her. She arrived back at the house in Audubon Park at 11:34 p.m. But when she got there, the house was shut down for the night and the doors were locked. Andrea couldn't get in. A few weeks earlier, Ethan and Sarah had added some additional locks on the doors of the house, and Andrea had been locked out before because she couldn't get in. Andrea was upset that she could not access the house and felt that she was not welcome. On top of the argument earlier that evening and her perception that her family disapproved of her, it added to her sense of being wronged. Andrea decided to walk to Aaron's house in the 4000 block of Fincastle Road. It was about a mile away. Aaron, who had kids of her own, had worked all day and put her kids to bed. She and her friend Michelle were sitting on the front porch sharing some wine and catching up. Andrea walked up upset and crying. Aaron let her stay for a bit and tried to calm her down, but Andrea was being loud and it was very late, and Aaron had neighbors and sleeping kids. Andrea stayed there till after 1, and then Aaron drove her home and dropped her off. She didn't know Andrea was not able to get into the house. And then she went home and went to bed. But Andrea showed up again, crying, and said she had knocked and knocked at the house and no one let her in. She wanted to stay the night. Erin tells us that she now regrets turning her sister away, but it was close to 2 a.m., she had to work the next day, the kids were asleep, Andrea was a night owl, and Andrea had a place to stay, her mom's house. Erin called both her parents for advice, and they had told her everyone needed to stop enabling Andrea, who was going to have to fix herself. Erin asked them to try to contact Sarah and Ethan to let Andrea into the house. Then Erin told Andrea she had to go back to her mom's house, and they would talk the next day when Andrea felt better. Andrea walked away down the sidewalk toward her mom's home while looking at her phone. It was 1:38 a.m. Erin never saw her sister again. Just so listeners understand the environment, the neighborhood that all this took place in is quite safe. It boasts a country club, community police force, and nice houses with cared-for yards. This is not an area that has any real incidents of violent crime. And Andrea's 15-minute walk back to her mom's house would have taken her along exclusively residential side streets with a walking bridge and so on, so it was very safe. But despite the best efforts of the family's PI, who canvassed the entire area, no surveillance footage of Andrea walking has been located. Andrea's phone records did show that she called numerous people as she walked, trying to get someone to come hang out with her. But some crucial phone data was hard to access. Initially, Andrea's phone records were believed to show that she was at her mom's house around 1:54 a.m., and her phone was periodically active there until it was shut off around 6:30. It is only thanks to a review of the case by Joe Fanciulli, a retired veteran homicide detective, that we have updated important information from Andrea's phone. Fanciulli was able to access Andrea's detailed phone activity through Google Dashboard. The records showed that Andrea did make it back to the vicinity of her mom's house. Her phone was there around 1:54 a.m., but then, after a period of time, it was on the move again. Erin told us that the phone records showed that Andrea went to a nearby house, and her phone continued to be active until 6:31 a.m. This from the family's Facebook page for Andrea, quote, "A deeper look at the Google timeline shows that the phone stopped transmitting location information from her mom's house at 3:53 a.m. and began transmitting again briefly at 6:31 a.m., but the phone was not on long enough to display her location on the Google timeline at 6:31 a.m. Therefore, it is not known what Andrea's location was or the phone's location was after 3:53 a.m. This has been verified by engineers at Google," end quote. Fanciulli explained, quote, "What I found in doing some back-checking was that the phone may not have been on at the house at 6:31 a.m. because when it shut off and came on, it never updated that 3:53 a.m. location. We don't know where Andrea was from 3:53 a.m. on, but we do know that the phone was last on at 6:31 a.m., end quote. After that time, the phone was permanently shut off or died. What's remarkable about this timeline is that Sarah and Ethan said they never saw Andrea that night. They didn't hear her knocking, they didn't let her inside the house, and they didn't interact with her at all. For some, this strains credulity. And an ID channel docuseries on the case called Finding Andrea reported that neighbors often heard loud arguments among Sarah, Ethan, and Andrea, and that Ethan wiped his phone sometime on or near the night that Andrea vanished. And at the time, the phone records were believed to show that Andrea had vanished from her mom's house. This all looked very suspicious for Sarah and Ethan. Police obtained a search warrant and searched the house for 6 hours. As far as Erin knows, they found no indication there of Andrea's phone or what happened to her. Cadaver dog searches of both her mom's home and Erin's own home also turned up no trace of the eldest Knabel sister. And while the family believe they know the location of the other house Andrea's phone reflects she was at that night, the residents have not permitted searches of the premises by volunteer groups working with the family. You just heard me say that the police conducted searches for Andrea. This was because the family had reported her missing when they couldn't find her. On the morning after the argument, when Andrea walked away from Erin's house and went to her mom's house and then another house and then vanished, her mom texted the family asking if anyone knew where Andrea was. It was early on August 13th, around 9:30 a.m. Erin assumed Andrea spent the night at a friend's and went about her day. But when Andrea hadn't shown up or been in contact by that afternoon, she became concerned. She started calling around to Andrea's friends, including extended family, her two closest friends Yvette and Amber, and everyone else she could think of. Amber didn't get back to her until the 17th, and when she did, she said what everyone else had said, that she hadn't seen or heard from Andrea in days. This is when Erin recognized that her sister was really gone. After talking it over with her parents, Erin reported her sister missing that day. The Louisville Metro Police initially were not too concerned. After all, Andrea was an adult and had no real fixed address. She could have crashed with a friend or run off with a boyfriend. But Erin and the family knew that Andrea had never just left before, and she would never have stayed out of touch. She wasn't the type to hold a grudge, and she would never have chosen to cut off contact with her kids. Erin also does not believe that her sister would have harmed herself. Despite her troubles and her being upset that night, Andrea was an optimistic person, and her family believed she would not have chosen to take her own life and abandon her children. Frustrated with a lack of progress from the police, Erin started a social media campaign to dredge up information about her sister's whereabouts. Mike Knabel said the search for his daughter has largely moved online through the Where is Andrea Knabel Facebook page. And the page has generated some tips. Erin says that the police now have some persons of interest, but they still don't know what happened to her beloved sister. Andrea's white purse and phone, both of which she had on her person when she walked away from Erin's house, are also missing. Erin and her father, who are the only family members who have spoken publicly about Andrea's case, do not believe that her disappearance was random. If foul play befell her, it was at the hands of someone she knew. Andrea had been looking for someone to hang out with that night. Perhaps she trusted the wrong person. Or perhaps something happened to Andrea and it was covered up by shutting off her phone and getting rid of any evidence. As for suspects, according to the PI, Leonard, Ethan told him that the police had cleared him and there is no evidence that either he or Sarah did anything to Andrea. Also, according to Leonard, both exes of Andrea have been cleared as well. Erin and her father Mike agree about what the most likely theory is. They told Wave 3, quote, "I've always felt it is the most likely scenario that she left with someone that she knew," said Erin. Mike said, quote, "We think she was able to reach somebody she knew and went off into the darkness and something awful happened." Although the family says there are certain people who know what happened to Andrea, no one is talking. In an interview with WDRB, Mike said, quote, "We hope she left on her own and we pray that she did and she's happy and healthy somewhere. But we fear that somebody took her, and there's some people she knows that would be involved in that type of thing." Indeed, the family has said that they have been told by law enforcement that at this point, Andrea is likely no longer alive. There's one more thing that everyone needs to know about Andrea and why her case stands out. Andrea was someone who gave of her time to help find missing people. She loved to look into cases of vanished persons online. She was a member of Missing in America and a good friend of its founder, and she often participated in searches for missing people. When she herself went missing, the PI, Tracy Leonard, volunteered his time to help look for her because he knew Andrea from the Missing Persons Network. In June 2022, Community United effort known as Q helped the family by conducting a large-scale 2-day search of the entire Audubon Park area. The organization brought in 12 cadaver service dogs and handlers from 11 states. Mike told Wave 3, quote, "Every piece of woods, every dumpster, every viaduct, everything was looked at multiple times. Nothing was found." Andrea Knabel is 5'7" with hazel eyes, dirty blonde hair, and weighs 190 pounds. On the night of her disappearance, she was wearing a light-colored tank top and white shorts. There is a $10,000 reward for information in her case. Mike Morford sat down to talk with Erin Knabel, Andrea's sister, for Missing Persons. That conversation is coming up after a word from our sponsors. This season on DNA ID, a couple shot at a campground, a realtor waylaid at a home showing, a bookstore owner stabbed among her volumes, a young soldier dumped in a parking lot. What do all these tragic cases have in common? They are all cold cases solved after decades of frustration and futility by forensic genealogy. I'm Jess Betancourt, and in Season 2 of DNA ID, I'll bring you 24 more fascinating cases in which the killer eluded generations of investigators until science and some crafty genealogists cracked them at long last. Listen to DNA ID on your favorite podcast platform. New episodes drop every other Monday.
Welcome to Missing Persons, Erin, and thanks for coming on to discuss your sister, Andrea's case with us.
Hi, thanks for having me.
It's my pleasure, and I'm happy we can try and give you some help here and get the word out about the case and that it still needs help being solved. Your sister's been missing now for about 3 years, and I think there's some irony there because she's someone who was an advocate for the missing. I'm curious, how did she get into that, and was that something she enjoyed? Was that a big part of her life?
Yes, Andrea learned about Missing in America through Suzette Rodriguez. That was her closest friend out of the group of women who looked for missing people. They worked together, so I think that's how Andrea was first introduced to this. And her whole life, she's always been a very caring person that just wants to help everyone around her. And I think she saw this as an opportunity where she could really help out. And she just has a lot of skills that happen to really be useful in this type of work. She was really good at reading maps and directions around neighborhoods, and she had really good people skills too. She had a lot of friends. Very big circle of friends.
So she put some of the things that she had, some of the skills she had to use in doing this advocacy for the missing.
Yes.
And if you could, would you tell us a little bit about her, help listeners get to understand who she was and a little bit about her life?
Yeah, Andrea, when we were kids, we went to private schools. My parents actually had to take her out of the private schools because it wasn't challenging enough, and they put her in an advanced program at a magnet school. So she's, from a very early age, she was a very bright child. I think my dad said that she could name every business along the street and say her ABCs before, and she was maybe 18 months old. So Andrea's always been a very brilliant person. And like I said, she also had the social skills. So she just was always a lot of fun to be around. I ended up making friends with a lot of her friends growing up. So it was fun having, it's like when you're in high school, especially, it's like a dream come true when you have a big sister that's cool, that'll drive you around. And it was always a lot of fun being with Andrea. We've been friends pretty much our whole life. When I had my son, I had him at a young age. I was 19 when my oldest was born, and she told me immediately, "Don't worry, I've got you. I'll help you every step of the way." And she stayed true to that. She was there anytime I needed a babysitter or just to hang out. A lot of times when you have a child at an early age like that, everybody that you think cares kind of leaves. Andrea never left. She was always there for me. She was an amazing aunt.
So it sounds like you were pretty close then.
Yes, definitely.
And how many siblings were there between all of you?
3 girls in our family. So Andrea, she was born in 82. She'd be 40 now. She's still with us. I was born on Andrea's 3rd birthday. So I'm 3 years younger than her. And then our little sister, Sarah, is 1.5 years younger than me.
Okay. So I think when looking at missing persons cases, it's important to go back and look at some of the relationships in people's lives, some of the circumstances to examine them. Can you tell us a little bit about, your family in general, just growing up? Was there any times you didn't get along? Were the circumstances always good, or was it, the typical sisters that get into fights and then make up and sort of move on about their business?
I would say definitely, as kids and everything, it was the normal kids, sisters that argue. We all, for a long time, we all wore the same size clothes. So it was like a fight over clothes. Who took my shirt, stuff like that. And we wore the same shoe size, we're the same height. So, they were just like normal growing up arguments and stuff that every family has with girls like that. But we always made up. We're the kind of family that no matter what was said in an argument, 30 minutes later we're over it, because the main thing is we love each other. So we've always been very quick to forgive. Like we don't say apologies. We're just like, who cares anymore? We get over things quickly, just because we're very close. As adults, I feel like Sarah, she moved to Lexington probably, like, I would guess around maybe 2004 or 2005. So she's lived out of town most of our adult life. And with me having a child at a young age, I was very settled down early on. So her and I really didn't have a lot in common. We kind of would see each other on the holidays and things, and that was fine. I love my sister, even if we're not as close. Andrea, like I said, she helped me raise my son, and she was always there for us. So Andrea and I remained close and did the mom and aunt activities together, took him to the zoo, took him hiking, just did everything with him. I know, for example, on the 4th of July, that was always a time that we got together with him especially. And we would always do certain holidays together.
So the two of you had more interactions and more time to spend together, basically. Yeah,
and Andrea, she was the kind of person, like, I was more settled down. I rarely would go out or go to bars or things like that, which, that's just my personality. No shame if people like to go out. Sarah was, leading like the no kids life. She would probably go out more. And Andrea kind of like enjoyed doing both, so she would do like the family stuff with me, and she would, get dressed up and get her and do her hair and go out and have, adult fun with my little sister. So Andrea was really close to both of us, I would say. And like I said, Sarah and I, we still to this day, we love each other, but we don't seem to have as much in common. We enjoy being together on the holidays, and that's about it.
Sure. Now, Andrea, as an adult, she had wound up having 2 children of her own, 2 sons. And these are from 2 different relationships, if I'm not mistaken.
Yes.
Who were the dads of Andrea's 2 sons? And I don't mean specifically their names. I'm mainly trying to get at is, were they on good terms with Andrea? Was the relationships good with them? And what was the custody situation of her sons?
So Andrea's oldest child and his father, they got along well, just, the relationship just did not work out. So they remained cordial and they were friends, respectful for their son. They worked out everything outside of court. So they arranged the parenting schedule and everything financial, stuff like that on their own. After Andrea went missing, he helped me hang flyers. He's also spoken with any investigator that I've asked him to speak with. So he's been extremely helpful. Her younger son's dad and her probably they don't get along as well. They had to work it out in court, and I don't think it's anything personal against Andrea. I feel that in his situation, their son was his only child. Like, basically, he's an only child on his dad's side of the family. So I think he was just very, like, maybe a little bit overprotective of him. So I think that he means well, but they just did not get along as much.
But overall, there's no, bad blood there anywhere between either of those relationships? Any big friction?
Right. Right. I mean, it seemed like just normal stuff. Exes don't get along. They break up for reasons. So to me, it seemed normal. Those situations were normal.
Sure. Now, it's been reported, and again, correct me if any of this that you hear is wrong, but is it correct that Andrea was diagnosed with multiple personality disorder?
No, that's a rumor.
Okay.
I know that when we were younger, she might have had a little bit of depression, but to me, that's pretty normal stuff. A lot of people have that. So we were kind of worried that something more was going on with Andrea before she went missing, because in the last 2 years before she left us, she was having more problems. So Andrea and I always helped each other out. Anytime, she always knew she could call me. But, that's the reason she walked to my house that night. But it was becoming very one-sided leading up to her going missing, where I was always the one kind of looking after her. And I was okay with that. That's, I love my sister. But with that being said, we were worried about her. We needed to fix the underlying problem. My dad had asked her to go to rehab. He said, I'll send you to a really nice place that someone he actually knew had been to. He offered to pay for it, and she was offended by that. So the next step was like, let's get her to see a psychiatrist. My mom was taking her to doctor's appointments and going with her to make sure that she would follow doctor's instructions. So we were like in the very early stages of helping her with what was causing her issues.
I'm curious, was it verified that she had any kind of dependency on prescription drugs or anything like that?
I know that she had a prescription for Adderall. She told me that herself. I don't know if you would call it a dependency. I guess that would depend on if she was abusing it or not. And there was not enough information for me to say yes or no with that. There's been speculation that Brian Downey, her boyfriend that she met in 2017, which would have been 2 years before she went missing, there's speculation that he got her addicted to hard drugs and that was causing her behavior.
Yeah, I'm curious if you can just describe maybe some of the behavior you're mentioning. What kind of things did you notice that were out of character for Andrea?
She would talk about her skin a lot. She was having a lot of skin problems, which eczema does run in our family, and that is a very severe skin condition that pretty much everybody on my dad's side has. I have it. It flares up on my face when I'm pregnant, for example, so hormones can trigger it, allergic reactions, things like that. Well, Andrea, we knew that she had it, but she never had it like as bad as I did growing up. So I was wondering if maybe her skin problem flared up and she just didn't know what to do with it. It kind of gave her anxiety, I think. So like I felt like she was kind of probably making a bigger deal about that than it needed to be. But, that's very emotional to have a rash on your face. We didn't know if it was eczema, or obviously that can be a sign of hard drugs. Yeah, she lost her job. She told us that she had been laid off, but her coworker said that she was fired due to performance. So that was a really big deal because she took that job very seriously at one point. She lost a really good job that she had. She was kind of working odd jobs like restaurant jobs and food delivery and stuff like that. And kind of living in like dangerous parts of town. Like that wasn't how she normally was. Okay, random friends would come over. She would her cars would break down easily. Just, it seemed like it was like one problem after another, and it wasn't getting better until she got evicted.
Well, and that's what I was getting into. So it sounds like it was a real rough patch, and she wound up getting evicted from her apartment. How was she handling all of this, as far as you could tell?
Well, Andrea, she's the kind of person, she's a lot like my dad, and I think that's one reason why Dad and I are so close. She can remain positive in any situation, and she was my strength. For example, when I was going through my divorce, anytime I was feeling really down, she'd tell me, prove all those people wrong, prove them wrong, the ones that are saying these things about you, whether it was someone in the family or whatever. She was really good about being very inspiring and motivational, and that's what she was doing during this time period when she was living at our mother's house. Was she was just constantly on the go. Like she was applying for jobs, looking for parts for her car. She actually had some calls back for interviews. She was wanting to do a data entry from home job until her face healed, which made a lot of sense. So I know that she was making strides towards getting better. And, with being, no longer with her children's dad, obviously she had downtimes. She had breakups before in her life, and she was always able to bounce back. Well, I feel like it was cut short, and she was kind of shortchanged. It hurts me to see that she's being remembered as this person with problems that went missing, because to me, she's so much more than that. This was just a very small part of her life where she was having these issues.
Well, it sounds like you were there to help her out, to get through it. Your parents were positive and trying to help her out. And you mentioned your mom let her live with her at her house. So it sounds like she had a support system in place to get her through this time period.
Yeah, I would let her use my car anytime she asked. I told she could come over anytime she wanted to. But with us, we all work full-time jobs. I have 3 children of my own, and sometimes it got very intense. You know, she kind of was staying up late. That was another one of her odd behaviors that was happening, and she'd sleep in until like early afternoon. So when you're getting up early every day to take your kids to school and go to work, it gets really hard when you have someone else that's wanting to be up at nighttime. So we were kind of burning the candle at both ends is how it felt. We were having people tell us like to stop enabling her. A lot of people were telling us that. And the night she went missing, that was really the first time I set a boundary when I told her she could not stay the night at my house. I was just very, very emotionally and just physically exhausted. And what I thought was, you know, Andrea is a very dramatic person. She's been that way her whole life. She's very loud and very expressive. And that's one thing I love about her. But at that very moment, at like, 1:30 in the morning, I was just very tired. And I thought, Andrea, I know that you're going to be over it 30 minutes from now, just go home and sleep it off. Everything will be fine in the morning. I fully expected to hear from her the next day, complaining about last night and planning on what she was going to do the next day. Like I 100% thought that's what would happen. So it was very, very traumatic just to have someone I love so much disappear on what seemed like a very ordinary day.
And let's dive into that night a little bit closer, August 12th, 2019. So Andrea's staying at your mom's house, which was being renovated at the time, if that's correct.
Yeah.
And it was being renovated by your sister Sarah and her fiance. It's been reported that there was some kind of argument that night. There's some heated argument, which is what led Andrea to go to your house in the first place. Can you tell us a little bit more about that argument and what caused her to be that upset that she walked to your house in the middle of the night?
Yeah, what I was told by my mom, and then Andrea also, I talked to her that night about it for a while, that they were sitting at the dinner table. What my mom would do is come over every evening after work and kind of check out the bathrooms that were being renovated, and she'd bring food or groceries or anything that they wanted or needed. So that particular night, she brought at home some Chinese takeout. They were eating at the dinner table, and they started talking about Andrea's life choices because they felt, even though she was making strides towards getting back on her feet, they felt like she was also doing things that was hindering that. The main one is that she was having friends come over at all hours of the night, and they were worried about their safety just because these were people they had never met before. Andrea kind of, I guess my mom was kind of saying this stuff to her. My mom started the conversation, and the way my mom is, like, I love her to death, but it makes her very anxious if one of us is doing bad, because her thought process, she lost both of her parents at a very, very young age. She was probably in her 20s, and she had 3 young daughters at the time, and she had herself, she didn't have a support system like we do. So her thought process was like, I could get in a wreck tomorrow, and then where would you be? Like, what would happen to you? So my mom is kind of high strung sometimes because of that, because she just worries a lot. So my mom probably did not, come talk to her about it in the most gentle manner, which is just the way her personality is. And I think Andrea took offense to it and kind of jumped to getting offended by that. And then Sarah came in and was like, Andrea, mom's right. So Andrea felt like she was being teamed up on. And that's all normal stuff in our family. To me, that's just 3 people that love each other. They're in a hard situation. You have to tell the people that you love hard truths sometimes. And the way I was, when I felt like I needed to tell Andrea something, I would pay attention to her reaction. I would see that she would just get mad at me if I tried to talk to her. So I stopped doing it. I know that's probably, looking back, I kind of regret that. but I quit talking about it and just hoped I could like lead by example and show her like, you can have fun and still do the right things. But I didn't get through to her, I think. Anyway, so they kind of argued about that. Andrea went upstairs to cool off, and then a bit later she came back downstairs and asked Sarah's fiance for a ride to McDonald's, I guess, and then he dropped her off at a hospital. So, I mean, that's just an example of how easily, we move on from things.
Sure.
So,
I can understand you're trying to help her and their family's trying to help her, and you're being sort of brutally honest with her and not beating around the bush. And I think maybe Andrea could feel ganged up on or whatever. I could certainly see both sides of an argument like that. So she was upset enough. She left the house. And this is where I want to get into the timeline a little bit. So she leaves the house at 9:00. She went to a McDonald's that night. At the McDonald's, she's there sometime 9:00, 9:40. And this was with your sister's fiance, correct?
Right.
Okay. And then he drove her to that Kentucky Medical Center, and this was sometime around 9:50, close to 10:00. What was her reason for going there? And what was the interaction? Did he just drop her off there, or what happened there at the medical center?
Well, the plan was that he dropped her off, and Andrea was planning on using a gift card that our mother had for an Uber. So that way, Ethan wouldn't have to wait there with her, and she would have her ride home. So that was the plan for that situation, which made sense. He was wanting to remodel and work on that. And the reason why she went at that time is because she really did everything later on in the day. That's just what she was doing during that time period. None of us felt like that was the right way to do it, obviously. What a normal person would do is schedule a doctor's appointment. I think she wanted to get medicine for her face. She was very preoccupied with her skin condition. I think a part of the argument was they wanted Andrea to see a doctor, but they meant like a psychiatrist. And she kind of took it and made it what she wanted and said, well, you all wanted me to see a doctor. I want to go right now. So they were like, okay, I'll take you. And they arranged plans for her to have a ride there and a ride back.
Now, she left the hospital close to 11:30 via Lyft. Is that correct?
I'm not sure if it's Lyft or Uber. I could check with Tracy on that one.
One way or another, it was a ride of some sort that she hired to take her someplace.
Right.
Okay, so just a little bit after 11:30, she arrives back at your mom's house. Now, can you confirm that the locks were changed when she got there? And how did that happen, if that's correct?
The locks were changed. Well, a lock was added, to be more specific. They didn't take off the old lock. They just added a second one to both the front and the back door. And that was done weeks before Andrea went missing. And the reason I know that is because one time I was taking my kids to the park, and Andrea called me wanting to hang out. And I said, sure, if you want to come with us to the park, you can. So when I was bringing her home that evening from the park, Andrea couldn't get in. I was like, how come you can't get in? And she said, I don't have a key to the door. And so she called Ethan and Sarah, who were at a hardware store, and they said they were on their way back. So I just sat in my car with her and waited for Sarah and Ethan to get back. And when they got back, they opened the door and they all went inside. So, of course, I thought that was odd, but the way I felt about it, I knew it was a rocky time. And I'm like thinking, I'm not going to poke the bear. If they're all dealing with it and they're all fine, why bring it up,
Sure. So it
like
wasn't,
nobody was mad about it.
Okay, so it's not a case where he dropped her off at the hospital, then went home and changed these locks in the middle of the night, because I think that's a little bit of what's been out there, some kind of scenario like that.
Yeah, people they want to make it dramatic. They kind of use us like entertainment, I think. And that's where these things come from.
Sure. That's why it's good to have someone like yourself on to sort of clarify some of the things that have been inaccurately portrayed. I'm curious, when she got back there, she couldn't get in, the doors locked. Did she try knocking on the door, and did anyone in the house hear her or let her in, or did they talk? What happened there?
Yes, and I've lived in that house since I was, from 3 to like my probably 20 or something. And then, like when I was going through my divorce, I lived there for about a year. So I'm very familiar with that house and what it's like at every time of the day and night. And you can hear everything. Like if I'm outside on the phone and I'm talking too loud and my mom's upstairs trying to get to sleep, it'll wake her up. Like there's big windows in the house. You can hear everything. And Sarah and Ethan also were the type of people that are up later on in the evening and nighttime. That's when they would do most of their renovating. So I found it really strange that they said they were asleep at 11:30 at night. So that's something that we've never been able to really quite understand why that was said.
And just to clarify, so we know Sarah and Ethan were in the house. Was your mom at the house too?
No, there were no working bathrooms when this was happening. So
Okay.
Because of that, my mom thought it would be best if she stayed the night at either, she would stay at her sister's house or her best friend's. It was one or the other every night. And so my mom was really just there for an hour or two in the evening after she got off work.
Okay. So one way or the other, your sister Andrea can't get into the house. They claim they're asleep. She walks to your house. How far away was your house from hers?
It's about a 15-minute walk.
Okay. So,
And a pretty safe neighborhood. My mom, she lives in Audubon Park. I've done a lot of live videos of me walking that path just to raise awareness for her. And it has its own country club, their own police department. It's a very, it's a strict neighborhood with a lot of rules.
okay. So not a high crime area.
Not at all. No, it's usually around that time of night. It's usually pretty quiet unless somebody's coming home late or, you might see a police car go by.
Sure.
So it's a very, very quiet neighborhood.
So once Andrea arrives at your house, she tells you what happens, I assume, and then you talk it through and you're thinking that in the morning things will be better. How long was she at your house for before she left?
She was there for maybe about an hour and a half. I dropped her off at my mom's house because my friend Michelle was there with me. We were sitting on my porch when she walked up. I didn't have my phone on me. I was kind of just having like a time, how sometimes you want to unplug from electronics and just relax. So I had my phone in the kitchen and had not been looking at it much that evening. And so, unfortunately, I missed a lot of calls and texts from her. And she walked up and talked to me, and I told her I'd take her home, and she still was locked out. We have to go. We usually always go into my mom's back door. That's how we get into the house. So she wasn't able to get in. I didn't see her trying to get in. I just assumed that she got inside and went home, and then she came back. That's when she asked if she could stay the night, and if I could go back and change anything in my life, it would be that every time. I would change it, and I would keep her safe. But, in the moment, I had no idea the gravity of my decision. That's a very hard thing for me to talk about. I didn't use that door for like a year after Andrea went missing, just because it was the last place I talked to her. It was really hard telling her no and hard seeing her upset like that. So I went to the front of my house and looked out my kitchen window. I was hoping I hope she's not upset anymore. I hope she's kind of calmed down. And she looked like she quit crying, and she was more calm, and she was looking at her phone while she was walking, kind of scrolling with her finger up the phone. So it made me think okay, I'm glad she's kind of calmed down. That's good. Hopefully she'll just go home and sleep. And other times that they had arguments, it was normal for Andrea to sleep in her car. She would have a perfectly good bed to sleep in inside, and she would choose to sleep in her car. She was just upset. So I thought, the worst case scenario that could have happened that night is that she would sleep in her car. That was something she would choose to do sometimes. And this was in August. It was very nice weather.
And just to clarify, because I think I got a little bit confused while you're talking, and I don't want to miss out on anything. So
Okay.
Andrea came to your house. Was it more than once she came to your house that night?
Right.
Okay. The first time you drove her home, and then the second time she walked away from your house. Is that correct?
Yes.
Okay. Now, the time she left your house that second time walking away, about what time was that?
It was about 1:40 in the morning, August 13th.
Okay. And then she did get back to your mom's house as far as we know. Is that correct?
Yeah, we can see that on her Google dashboard by her cell phone.
Her cell phone essentially showed her arriving back at the house at about 2 a.m. or just before, right?
That's right. Yeah, and since then, there's been new developments in what happened after that, according to her cell phone. So anything what you might have seen online might not be accurate anymore.
Can you sort of update us what that is, what that information may be, if you can?
So I guess there's some different settings on Google Dashboard, and there's drop-down lists that were overlooked by the detectives and by their forensic, and also by the private investigator who checked out Andrea's laptop. Well, he keeps videos of everything he looks at, and I guess he was replaying all the videos, going over everything, and he noticed that she actually left her mom's house 10 minutes after she got there on foot, and she went just a few blocks further and was there for hours until her phone went off. So when we had a cadaver search recently for Andrea, the people at the property where her phone appeared to be refused to let us search. So, of course, we told the police about that, and they're handling it. They don't really give us updates, so I'm not sure if they were able to search or do anything.
Phone-wise, we know by her movements on that phone that she arrives back at the house at 2 o'clock, just before 2 o'clock, and then she goes to this other location, and she's there for a long time until the phone turns off. Is there any way to tell whether it's actually her with the phone, or are we just going by the clues on the phone that the phone itself was in these two different locations?
Yeah, the only thing we know for sure is that it was her phone did that. So, of course, Dad and I, we talk about this every day, multiple times a day. A lot of people don't realize that, but Dad and I are a team. I know I'm kind of like the face on social media, but we kind of divide up tasks is how we do it. And since I'm better with social media, I do that part. Dad normally does the news, and he talks to the police more. Anyways, so what Dad and we've brainstormed all the different possibilities of what that could mean. And we thought it's obviously for how I feel about my little sister and her character, my feelings tell me that never in a million years would she have anything to do with that. But with that being said, I was not there, and this is too important to go off of emotions. So we have to go off of facts. So we can't ignore the elephant in the room. So one possibility is that something bad happened at that house and that someone took her phone and walked away with it to make it seem like she was okay. So that's one possibility. Another possibility is that she was walking down the street and maybe she saw someone outside on their porch, and she went and hung out with those people and something bad happened. I talked to the neighbors in that area, and garbage day is on Tuesday morning. So it would have been normal for garbage cans to be sitting out Monday evening because it's early Tuesday morning that trash pickup happens. So it's possible someone walked up there and threw her cell phone in that garbage can. We can't really tell if the phone was moving around at that location or if it just sat in one spot. Something else interesting is that one of her friends that spoke to her earlier that day said that she was wanting her to meet her at a gas station. Well, that the direction that Andrea's phone went would have been the path that you take to get to that gas station. So I think that's a very strong coincidence that she was talking about walking in that direction, and then later on that night her phone went that way. So that makes me feel more confident that it was actually Andrea. it's possible that someone picked her up. Someone could have picked her up and heard her right then and thrown her phone in the garbage and went on with her. That's a possibility. It's just, there's so many different possibilities, really. It's hard to say.
Sure. It sounds
but
like
those are the things we came up with.
It sounds like you're open to looking at all the options, even if they point towards your family. You're considering that and not just rolling that out automatically. Yeah,
I mean, we have to. But again, as far as how I feel about that, like, there's no way in hell. Like, that's ridiculous. But like, we can't, I feel like it would be foolish to ignore that. And I know a lot of people criticize us and say that that's what we do, but that's really not the case. People don't really think about, we can check every possibility there is all at the same time. We can do multiple things at once, and that's what we're doing.
Sure.
To say, regardless of what has happened, raising awareness will give us more information to get us, to where we want to be.
Yeah, because someone out there may have heard something, or may have a clue, or may have found a phone, things like that. Absolutely. Mm-hmm. I'm curious, for Sarah's part, when Andrea arrived back at 2 a.m. that second time, did they still claim they were sleeping? They never woke up? Is that what they said? So they didn't hear or interact with her in any way? Okay.
Right. Uh-huh.
So, and just to touch on one more thing, you mentioned this meeting that was sort of in the direction she was heading. Do you know what the meeting was about, or has that friend been talked to that wanted to have that meeting?
Yeah, my dad talked to her, and I think police did as well. And I think they were just wanting to spend time together. So Andrea had two friends that, like, during this time period, obviously you're going to want, when you're having a stressful time in your life and constantly working hard to fix your problems, you're going to want to, like, relax and unwind with your friends sometimes. So she had two friends that she would do that with. One was Yvette, who is actually related to her ex-boyfriend, her oldest son's dad. So she would go to Yvette's house, or she would go to Amber's house, who was her old roommate. So Yvette is the one that she was supposed to meet and hang out with that night, and she's been talked to. As far as I know, cleared of any kind of involvement.
Do you know at what time the phone actually went dead? Was it sometime after 6:30 in the morning?
I think so, yeah. I think it was. So she left my mom's house about 2:10 or 2:15. She would have gotten to the next location probably before 2:30 in the morning. And I think it was on for a few hours at that location. And I'm assuming it died. I'm not positive, but that's what would make it to me as to why it never came back on.
So when did your family first notice that something was wrong and that Andrea was missing? Who noticed it, and what was the conversation like at that point?
Well, the night that we were talking about, like August 13th after midnight, I had called both of my parents. So they obviously were kind of worried about Andrea. So the next day, my mom texted me, Sarah, and Andrea in our group text and asked if anyone had talked to Andrea. She said, I haven't talked to Andrea. This was about 9:30 in the morning. And my thoughts were, it made me happy that my mom was checking on her. But I thought, I'm sure Andrea's probably at her friend's house sleeping. Like, that would be a normal thing for her at that time. But I just kind of made a note, like, I'm going to check on this again later on in the day and see if she's okay. I was worried about her being upset with me for telling her no that night. That was my worst feeling at that point. So then later on that day at about 3:30, my mom said the same thing again. She still had not talked to Andrea. And Andrea is the kind of person that even if she is mad at us, she always answers the phone. Even if it's to say, I don't want to talk to you right now, I'll talk to you later. I'll see you at dinner time, something like that. She always answers. So when my mom said, I still haven't talked to Andrea, that's when I really started getting scared. I started checking with all of her friends. I even checked with our relatives that I knew she didn't talk to as much. I reached out to every single person I could think of that she knew. That include like Nancy, Suzette, Amber, even friends that, friends she had for like years that she maybe hadn't talked to recently, because it would be a normal thing for her to reconnect with her friends every now and then. So none of them knew where Andrea was. And the only person that was not answering my calls and texts was her best friend, Amber. And Amber is the one that she was most likely to be with because she would usually go to Amber's house. So my thoughts were like, this is not like Andrea to hold a grudge. She never holds a grudge. None of us really do. But hopefully she's mad and she's telling Amber, like, don't answer it, you know. I was hoping that that's what was happening, but in the back of my mind, I was like, that's not what she does, though. And so I just continued to call other people. And then Amber finally got back to me after everybody else had said no on August 17th, 2019. And she told me she hadn't talked to Andrea in at least 2 weeks, like they had an argument. That's when all hell broke loose for me. Like, there were alarms going off in my mind, and I called the police. I told Dad, like, I think Andrea is really missing. I think we need to file a police report. He agreed with me, so I filed the police report. They came and wrote everything down, and I was shocked that it wasn't like an urgent thing. That was really confusing for me. So I did what I could and started posting it all over social media. I said, does anyone know where Andrea is? And I posted a picture of her. And that was one of the hardest things I've ever had to do, because even though my logic is telling me she's gone, everybody that she knows has not seen her. My emotions were telling me, Aaron, she's going to be so mad at you. I'm embarrassing her now, saying that she's missing. I've basically called the police on her. She's going to be so mad. So, like, it's hard for your emotions to really fathom what the gravity of the situation. Like, it was so hard. But I knew I had to use my logic in that moment and do what was right for Andrea. So I just began raising awareness, and I've been doing that ever since. And anytime we get a lead or a possible sighting, we check it day or night.
And how much time had passed before the report was filed?
The last time she had been seen was by me, as far as we know, August 13th. So this was like 1:30 a.m. probably 1:40, August 13th in the morning. And then I filed the police report the evening of August 17th. So 4 days passed.
You said you were worried about embarrassing her and that you were overreacting, but had Andrea ever went away for days at a stretch without contacting anyone?
Never. She never did that.
So that sort of prompted you to know that something wasn't right, that she wouldn't do that.
Yeah, and there's a word for it. I'm not sure what it's called, but it's hard it's hard to fully wrap your brain around a tragedy that is of this, you know, someone that you love so much. It's hard to fully understand it, but I had to do what my brain was telling me and ignore my feelings. It was really hard, but I'm glad that I did, because I think, would it have ever gotten done if I hadn't have done that? That's a scary thought.
Let's talk a little bit about the investigation over the past 3 years since she went missing. Obviously, there were searches and things like that. Is there anything that's known about any surveillance video of, you know, people with ring cams or things like that? Has any of that been looked at to see maybe any glimpses of Andrea? She sort of made her way that early that morning?
Yeah, so Tracy Leonard is the private investigator who volunteered to find Andrea, and he actually worked with Andrea, or I should say volunteered with Andrea, Missing in America, to help find missing people. So he felt like he had lost one of his own. So he was very determined to help find Andrea. He's found at least 188 people that I know of. And I've seen testimonies and posts that those family members with lost loved ones have made. So I know that this to be true. Anyways, so we've used his help ever since Andrea's been missing, and he instructed us. It was myself, Dad, and Mark Baker. We went up and down every street that we know she passed, and we looked for cameras and we looked for Ring doorbells, and we knocked on doors and asked people if we could review the footage, and most of them were either not on or they did not reach the street, because these yards are pretty a decent size where the camera doesn't span all the way to the street.
So there are no clues that were able to be found on any of that footage, it sounds like.
Right. And when she left from my street over to Audubon Park where my mom lives, she went on this walking bridge that people use to get to a parking lot, but it also connects the two neighborhoods. So because of that, she was using all side streets and neighborhood streets. She didn't go on any main roads where there could have been businesses. So
I'm curious too, is there anything of Andrea's besides herself or that are missing, maybe purse, phone, any of that stuff recovered or is still missing today?
She had a flat, white, shiny snake print looking, it was either like a clutch purse or like a flat wallet. I think it's probably like a flat wallet, like a long flat wallet that could probably keep a few bills in it and like some cards. She had that in her back pocket and it stuck out a little bit because it was a longer wallet. And then she had her cell phone on her. Neither of those things have been found.
Now, can you confirm that the police have searched your mom's home using cadaver dogs? And if so, what were the results of that?
A few days after Andrea went missing, the police came to my mother's house and they had a search warrant. They just asked her to go out to eat and said, oh, we'll be in there for a couple hours. Well, they were there for like probably 6 hours total, which was fine. You know, she wanted Andrea to be found, of course. So she did whatever they wanted. And I think there were like maybe 6 or 8 forensic vans there. So they searched everything, did everything they could, didn't find anything to my knowledge. The search warrant was for any electronics belonging to Andrea, which I'd already turned in her laptop. So that was already turned in. They didn't find her cell phone. I think my mom had a few broken phones. You know how sometimes when you get a new phone, you don't know what to do with the broken one, so you just put it in a drawer or something?
Sure.
Well, I think they took some of her broken phones just in case they were Andrea's. So that was done. Tracy Leonard and his private investigators searched my mom's home, didn't find anything. I've searched it multiple times ever since Andrea went missing over the years. I searched the backyard. I even looked in my neighbor's yards just in case someone or herself threw the phone over the fence, you know? So I've checked around pretty thoroughly. I've checked the garage, and I think the police did as well. We've had different volunteer organizations come. So one was Paging Coast Search and Rescue. Their dog did not find anything in there. And then we had the most recent one is Q Center for Missing Persons. They're a very reputable volunteer organization that help look for missing people. One of the services they offer is cadaver dogs. So we had a large scale search across Louisville about a month ago, and I asked if we could begin the search at all the areas where she was last seen, including mine and my mother's house. Not because I thought she was going to be found in either of our houses, but I knew that it would take like 5 or 10 minutes to do it. And I was just tired of all the mean comments and everything. I wanted people to realize like that's not what happened, so we could all focus on what really did happen. So the dogs showed no interest at either of our houses. So that means they didn't find, obviously they didn't smell the scent of death. They can also smell for like large pools of blood where there could have been foul play, that nothing like that at all. And same thing with every other search area. Like I said, one of the owners of a property we were wanting searched refused the search. So that's something that it's obviously on our minds. We told the police about it, hoping they'd get a search warrant and search it themselves. But we don't know if that's happened or not. The police, they don't tell us everything. They don't report to us. So we're kind of in the dark with what the police have done.
So there's a little bit of non-cooperation from that one person, and the police are sort of handling that. It's also been reported that Ethan and Sarah haven't been cooperative with the investigation, and they haven't taken part in searches for Andrea, haven't done interviews and so on. Can you confirm that is accurate?
Early on when they were living in Louisville, they would drive. They didn't come to any of the foot searches, but they would drive in their cars and look in areas where there were possible sightings. I think I know my mom was worried about their safety just because they had so much hate from the public. So my mom discouraged them from doing anything like that. She would tell them not to come and to anything. And I don't think that I think it was probably a lot for them to handle, losing Andrea and then also having people blame them. But that's my perspective of it. I don't talk to them very much. So I'm not sure if that's exactly their feelings, but that's what my mom has basically said to me.
Sure. Now, I know your father has mentioned that the Jefferson Memorial Forest was searched just in June of this year because some person of interest was seen there. Can you comment on that, who that person of interest is, maybe without naming them, and why they would search that area?
Well, we have several persons of interest, and some of them are just in that part of town, really. And I think the reason that we searched Jefferson Memorial Forest is because there's a spot there where it's common to find deceased people. I guess people are dumped there, unfortunately. So I think that was determined by Nancy and Joe, which they kind of only came around when the cameras were rolling. So I'm not sure if that was a waste of time or not. I don't know if they wanted to do that just for the cameras or if it was a real thing, but we did it anyways, just in case. And obviously we didn't find her there.
So the searches that have been done haven't produced any signs of Andrea?
Yeah, I mean, early on we were looking for her in case she was maybe homeless, choosing to be homeless. We looked for like her wallet, her phone, any kind of anything at all that could have been hers, any sign of life, and didn't find anything.
And where does the case stand today as far as the investigation? Are they at a standstill at this point, do you think?
Well, the way I feel about it is with 3 years passing and not hearing any new information from the police, it makes me feel like they are not really making it a very big priority. I don't know if that's actually true, but that's just how it feels. I know they're very short-staffed. There's only one person in the missing persons unit, and the missing persons unit is now merged with the homicide unit. So I don't think that they are like purposely not giving Andrea's case the time. I think that they're overwhelmed, and it's a very unfortunate situation.
Sure.
We're still continuing to look for Andrea no matter what, and we've actually gotten some very solid leads. We know people that probably know what happened to Andrea. We just have not been able to get those people to talk. We need actual physical evidence where people are forced, where they have to talk to save their own skin. Obviously, that's what it's coming down to. One of those leads came from the awareness we were raising early on social media and on the news. And then another one that kind of matched that one came after Finding Andrea came out, and the person saw Finding Andrea. And we've gotten other ones that from talking, branching out and talking to other people that know those people. So we're just doing everything we can to get more information.
Sure.
It's really hard. Very, very hard. But I think raising awareness has been very effective in Andrea's missing case, and that's why I'm continuing to do that.
And so I know you're approaching this case with an open mind, looking at all possible outcomes. One thing we haven't talked about, in your mind, is there any chance that Andrea would have, A, just gone off and started a new life someplace and got away from everything, a fresh start, something like that, or B, knowing her as well as you do, is there ever a scenario where she might harm herself? Maybe she was going through a lot and just couldn't deal with it anymore. Are either of those possibilities in your mind?
I've had people come to me with that, especially one time a police officer brought it up. I kind of felt like he said it because he wanted me to forget about it, forget about Andrea. And to me, that sounds absolutely crazy. She was my motivation and my inspiration in my downtime. And she was fully ready to get back on her feet and show people that they were wrong. I feel like she was actively doing everything she could to fix things, and she could see the light at the end of the tunnel. She had plans, and she wasn't ready to give up. So I think no. And also, I think that I've read that people in our age range are usually found pretty quickly if they're deceased. And it's a situation like that. That's what I've had other patrol officers tell me that too, that if she had overdosed or, ended her life in other ways, that she would have been found. I don't think that's a possibility. I think the experts are saying the most likely situation, unfortunately, is like a homicide or something, because why hasn't she been found?
Sure.
That's not normal. And the police have told me it's not normal for a person. It's just not in human nature for us to quit talking to absolutely everyone we know. Eventually you're going to call someone and reach out. Like, it's just not, it's a very, very hard thing for someone to do. And especially Andrea, she's somebody that I talk to almost daily. So I could never see her doing that to me personally, let alone her young children that miss her dearly.
Yeah. And I'm going to put you on the spot and sort of ask you, based on everything you know, based on everything you've learned and knowing your sister's case as well as you do you have a theory of what happened?
What I've felt happened from the very beginning, just because of how well I know this part of town. This is where I've grown up. This is home to me my whole life. What I think is that it was not random, whatever happened. Like, things like this don't happen here. So I think that whatever happened, it was someone that knew her if she was hurt. I think she was kind of looking for, people say she was looking for a ride. That's not accurate, because she was very close to everywhere, where she lived and everything. What she was wanting was someone to pick her up and hang out with her. So I think that she left with someone and something bad happened. That's how I feel about it. I don't want that to be true. So even though logic tells me that, I still have hope, and I'm always going to have hope just in case, There's people that are found 10 years from now, and they've been in a basement the entire time. Andrea, the way I feel is that it's very possible she could be in a situation like that, just hoping that we don't give up on her. So I still also have hope that it could be something like that.
It sounds like you're prepared, though, for the worst. Even if that happens, you still want to know what happened to her and who's responsible.
Yeah. Yeah, I want to help Andrea any way that she needs help, even if that means giving her a proper burial and making sure whoever it is that may have caused this stays in prison for the rest of their life. The reason it's easy for me to talk about this, I've had a lot of people judge me with my demeanor, is because I can talk about this because I don't think that, I still have hope that she's alive. I'm still hoping. I've grieved that my sister's no longer here with me right now, but I still have hope that she could come back. So I'm going to remain hopeful, because that's what keeps me going. That's what makes it easy for me to continue on with my day. Because at the end of the day, I have to be strong for my family. I have 2 nephews that are missing their mom, and I have 3 sons that need me. So I'm going to choose to remain positive and hopeful, even though I know that the most likely scenario is a terrible one.
I mentioned at the front of this episode that your sister was a missing persons advocate. How has that community been helpful in Andrea's case? Have they contributed as far as, I know you mentioned some of the things that were done as far as searches, were there flyers, any sort of support system for your family to help get through this and find out what happened to Andrea?
One thing that's been very humbling through all of this is just the fact that Andrea's own actions is actually helping us in finding her, just because of how helpful she was to every person in that community. It is coming back and helping us out, from anywhere from the media to investigation discovery. They might look at it as an interesting twist to where it makes people want to learn about it. But I look at it as, people talk about karma and how doing good for other people, it comes back, and you don't ever regret being kind to someone, basically. if you're going to have regrets in life, regret, hurting people and being bad to them and not helping them, because there's never a downside to it. But we've had so much help from other missing persons advocates covering her story. I've done probably dozens of podcasts now just because of the interest in Andrea being a missing persons advocate. I've had so many different organizations come and do so much for me. So it really has been a blessing through this tragedy, all the heroes that I have met, including you. I really appreciate you doing this for us.
Well, it is a good community of helpful people that want to get the word out, and we're certainly going to do our part to help let people know that this case needs to be still resolved. Are there any social media links, websites, Facebook pages, things like that you want to share with people where they can go learn more about the case, provide tips, that kind of stuff?
Yes, I use all my social media profiles to raise awareness for Andrea. Early on, it was very, very emotionally hard for me, and it was hard for me to keep up with multiple pages, but I've adjusted to this to where I'm able to now do a lot more. So I have Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, TikTok, Discord. There's probably others I'm not saying, but basically if you look up Andrea Knabel on any social media, you can find shareable missing posters. You can get updates on what's happening with Andrea missing. You can comment or ask questions to help us keep Andrea's story alive. I have multiple pages and Facebook groups on Facebook. That's the one I was the most familiar with. So there's a lot of different pages and groups that you can find links to those on my Facebook page. If you're wanting to be more involved, you can join my volunteer group that I started for Andrea. It's called Andrea's Angels. We communicate in a group text. It's in Messenger, actually, Facebook Messenger. So we brainstorm ideas on how to find her, whether that's raising awareness or new organizations that could potentially help us. We write podcasters, TV shows. I have former chiefs of police and the group that give us their knowledge. I have graphic designers that help us design posters. Really, any skill that you have that you think could help find Andrea, you're welcome to share that with us. And you can also just be a normal person like me that just wants to help. So if you're interested in that, please just send me a message. It's easiest for me to get my messages. Sometimes the notifications will flood in and it can get lost. So yeah, I would say send me a message. That's the best way if you're wanting to help in that way.
Well, it sounds like you're staying very visible and you're out there doing work, trying to find out what happened to Andrea, and I think she'd be very proud of your efforts. I want to thank you for coming on, and I hope that you do find out the truth about what happened to your sister.
Thank you so much. Yeah, I'm willing to do this the rest of my life, if that's how long it takes, but I'm really hoping that we get her back here any day now. That would be amazing.
We hope you enjoyed this episode of Missing Persons. If you can provide any information to help solve the case we discussed in this episode, please contact the appropriate authorities.
If you enjoy this podcast, please take a moment to tell your friends about missing persons and invite them to listen to the show. Word of mouth will help us grow and bring these cases to a larger audience. You can also help us by taking a moment to rate and review Missing Persons on the platform you're listening to us now on.
We'd like to tell you a little bit about our Patreon program. If you visit patreon.com/missingpodcast, you can sign up to help this podcast through ongoing monthly support. As a thank you, we'll give you an on-air shout-out, a thank you card and sticker, plus you'll get early access to ad-free episodes of the show and any bonus content.
Your Patreon support also goes towards helping the missing, because every dollar that we earn through Patreon will be split with charlieproject.org, the wonderful website that's been sharing information about so many missing persons cases for years. We hope you'll consider supporting the show. Just a reminder that new episodes of Missing Persons air every other Saturday. If you want to find us on social media, you can search Facebook for Missing Persons Podcast. And we're also on Twitter with the handle @missing_pod. And of course, you can find us on our website, missingpersonspodcast.net. As we wrap up this episode, we'd like to play a preview of a true crime podcast we think you'll like. It's called Murderific. Be sure to give it a listen. On behalf of Jess Betancourt, this is Mike Morford saying thanks, and we'll see you next time on Missing Persons.
My name is Bernadette, the host of Murderific True Crime Podcast. Murder plus horrific equals murderific. I cover some cases from the state of Maine in the United States and all over the world. Mass murders, domestic abuse, unsolved cases, serial killers, and mostly lesser-known subjects. We don't shy away from the details, but we do that with all respect. This isn't entertainment. These are real people's lives, and I'm here to tell their story. Join me for my Season 5 reboot, and together we will be executing podcasts one crime at a time.
Missing Persons is produced under the name AbJack Entertainment by Mike Morford and Jessica Betancourt. It's hosted and edited by Mike Morford, with research and writing by Jessica Betancourt. Be sure to listen every other Saturday for an all-new episode of Missing Persons.